Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Uh, to those who have joined, the students of the Haidh Masterclass. Last week was our first week of the Haidh Masterclass. We've done part one and we've done part two. Just as a recap of the last class, number one, the colors of blood. All colors of blood counted as Haidh and Nifaas, with the exception of white colors of blood. There were two views that we discussed. Number one, Imam Abu Yusuf's view, who states that brown colors are not counted at the start, but it's counted at the end. Others state that green colors of blood are not counted at the start, but it's counted at its end. We stated that the authentic view is that all colors of blood, it's counted as Haidh and Nifaas, with the exception of white. In regards to the views of Imam Abu Yusuf and others, a mufti is at his liberty to give a fatwa on any of those views based on need and necessity. The colors of blood counted when it is moist and not after it dries. Then we discuss the prevention of blood appearing. If the blood is felt internally, it hasn't exited, or it stopped with a cloth, etc., before actually appearing, the Haidh and Nifaas will not be established, the wudu will not break unless it appears. However, if it is actually stopped after appearing, then the rules relating to Haidh and Nifaas will still apply. In regards to Istihaadhah, if it's actually stopped before appearing, then we say that it stops at that point in time and no rules will apply thereafter. Then we looked at the kursuf, meaning cotton, something placed at the mouth of the farj, the vagina. One of the points discussed is that it is preferable for a virgin girl to use a pad at the time of Haidh only and not at the time of Tuhar. And for a non-virgin woman, she uses it all the time. One of the reasonings explained and understood is that a virgin girl is not married, hence she is not sleeping with her husband, etc. And therefore there is no fear of any form of emission during the days of Tuhar. Whereas with the non-virgin woman that is married, etc., there is a fear of some form of emission at the time of Tuhar, and therefore she uses the pad all the time. In normal circumstances, it's makruh and disliked to place something inside the farj, like a tampon, etc., as it resembles masturbation. However, in the case of tawaf, like one of the sisters queried, that would be an excused circumstance, an excused situation where it would be permissible to use. So if it's placed at the outer lips and it appears there, Haidh will start from that time. If it's placed inside the orifice, it will not apply until it's removed. So we discuss two aspects. One is the blood appearing, and one is the blood exiting. When it comes to Haidh and Nifaas, or rather when it comes to blood, etc., from the front passage or even from the back passage, etc., it is not a condition for it to flow. It simply has to appear. Once it appears after exiting, of course, then the necessary laws will apply. Now, in regards to blood, etc., from other than the front and the back passages, it must not simply appear, it has to flow, and that is the view of Imam Abu Yusuf, which fatwa is given upon. So, the difference between the front and the back passages is that the front and the back, it simply appears and all the rules apply. When it comes to other than that, it must flow, not just simply appear. Then we spoke about miscarriage. If a woman is pregnant and she miscarries at 12 weeks or more, where there are discernible features, then the laws of Nifaas will apply. If it is under that period, under 12 weeks, where there are no discernible features formed, then that blood could be one of two things. It could be either number one, Istihaadhah, or it could be Haidh. Istihaadhah, if obviously it cannot be counted as Haidh and Istihaadhah. It will be counted as Haidh if let's say a tuhar before that passed, and a minimum of 3 days or so appeared while she was pregnant, 3 days of spotting. So that is in regards to miscarriage. We looked at dry birth, where a woman gives birth and there is no blood flow. The fatwa is given in Imam Abu Hanifa's view, where she must still make ghusl nonetheless. Then we looked at twin births. And then Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf hold the view that Nifaas is counted from the first childbirth and not from the second childbirth, whereas Imam Muhammad counts it from the last child. Then we looked at two examples and looked at Iddah. When it comes to Iddah, however, it's different here. It's counted from the last child. In other words, the Iddah expires when the last of the twins is born. And we looked at Salah during labor. A woman will still perform wudu, make wudu and perform Salah. If that is not possible, she'll make tayammum and perform Salah. If she cannot actually physically do it, she will perform Salah with indications and ishara. When we looked at some maxims and rules regarding Haidh and Nifaas, we said that there must exist a tuhar, 15 days or more between two Haidh or between a Nifaas and Haidh. So you cannot have one Haidh immediately after another, and you cannot have a Haidh immediately after a Nifaas. There must be a separator of 15 days or more. If there's no separator, in other words, it's less than 15 days before you can actually count the next Haidh, etc., that blood during those days will be counted as Istihaadhah. There again, we looked at a few examples, and then we ended off by saying that there is no maximum period of purity. So that was the last discussion where we delved into some forms of tuhar. Today's lesson will cover all the different types of tuhars. So, number one, we looked at Haidh, we looked at Nifaas, and we even looked at Istihaadhah, specifically in regards to Haidh, in regards to Nifaas. A tuhar, a separator, is important. So, looking at the slides, general purity is of 4 types and do not fall under the definition of Haidh or Nifaas. So this is, in simple terms, a separator. When we talk of tuhar or purities, we are talking about separators. Now, the 4 types: tuhar sahih, valid purity; the second type, tuhar fasid, invalid purity; the third type, tuhar tam, complete purity; and the fourth type, tuhar naqis, incomplete purity. We look at all of the definitions, we look at examples. However, the most important of these 4 are the first 2, tuhar sahih and tuhar fasid, valid and invalid purities. Now, there's one point you must keep in mind. The rules relating to tuhars, purities, and separators are not as fixed, are not as rigid as the rules of Haidh and Nifaas. In other words, it is used as a guideline to determine what can and cannot be counted as Haidh, etc. But it can always change. It is not as fixed and as rigid as the rules of Haidh and Nifaas. Just to give you an example, it is used as a guideline in regards to early bloods. So a woman spots at a certain time during the month, but now she spots earlier. Now, this is one of the times or one of the most common cases in which we look at tuhar, we look at purities and separators to determine whether we can actually count it as a Haidh or not. Otherwise, it is not as fixed and rigid as the rules of Haidh and Nifaas. So keep that in mind. The reason I'm mentioning this here is that recently I received a call from a woman in UK, and she understood that the rules related to tuhar and purities are as fixed and rigid as the rules of Haidh and Nifaas, and she was following it religiously. In other words, if she had a tuhar of 60 days, for instance, she never counted any spotting that appeared during those 60 days until 60 days had passed. Now, this is incorrect. Tuhurs are used as guidelines to understand early bloods, etc. So let's look at the first definition. What is a tuhur sahih, a valid purity? Number one, it must be 15 days or more, right? So this is a general rule. A tuhur can never be less than 15 days, number one. Number two, in order to count a tuhur as valid, there must be no mixture of blood at the beginning, middle, or end. Now, this could be, or this could be in a situation where there's no blood on day 1 of the tuhur, there's no blood on day 10 of the tuhur, and there's no blood on day 15 of the tuhur. Or it could mean that there is no actual blood before day 1 of the tuhur, or after day 15 of the tuhur. In other words, there must be no bloods attached to it. When we talk about bloods, we're referring to invalid bloods. It must be a full, clean 15 days, no unnecessary or mixtures of bloods at any of its ends or in the middle of it. Number two. Number three, the tuhur is sahih, the valid purity must occur between two valid bloods, So for instance, you have 10 days haze, and then you have a full 15 days tuhur, no bloods spotted in those 15 days, and then you have another 10 days of bloods. So this 15 occurred between two valid bloods. This would be counted as a valid purity. So we know a tuhur is 15 days or more, but these two conditions must be kept in mind. And we look at examples now. So number one, we know 15 days, but we're looking at the second condition here, where there must be no mixture of blood at the beginning, middle, or end. So a beginner woman, we know the rule of a beginner woman: if she has continuous flow of blood, then she goes with a default habit of the first 10 days being 10 days of haze, and the second 20 days being 20 days of tuhur. So the first month she had full continuous flow of blood, so it's set 10 and 20, right? The second month now, she spots for 11 days. Then she is clean for 15 days. Then she has continuous flow of blood, and this continues past 20 days, right? So remember, she had a full month of continuous flow of blood. Then we set it at 10, 20. The second month now, she doesn't have full continuous flow of blood, spots for 11 days, clean for 15 days, and then she has continuous flow of blood. Let's look at the chart, right? So you look there from day 1 to day 10, she spotted, but then it went over onto day 11, right? So what's the first rule here? The first rule here is that if a woman exceeds her habit over 10 days, she must revert to her previous habit. So the previous habit here of a beginner woman is what? 10 days. So we'll count the first 10 days as haze, and we'll count the day 11 as invalid blood, right? But now she is clean for full 15 days, right? Remember, her tuhur habit has been established as 20 days. Now she is spotted for 15 days. The question is her tuhur going to change from 20 to 15, or is it going to remain 20? So now what's the rule of a tuhur? First, it must be 15 days. So yes, we got 15 days here, clean, no issues. However, at the same time, there must be no mixture of blood at the beginning or at the end, even in the middle. So here we've got bloods at the start of the tuhur on day 11, and we've got blood at the end on day 27. So this cannot be counted as a valid purity. When it cannot be counted as a valid purity, what does she do? She reverts to her previous habit of tuhur, which is 20 days, and she will not follow a 15-day tuhur. So look at the result there. She reverts to her default haze habit of 10 days due to the blood exceeding 10 days, invalid blood, right? That's the first rule. The second rule, she will also revert to her default tuhur habit of 20 days, as the 15 days tuhar was mixed with blood, and is insufficient to change her default habit from 20 days to 15 days. Again, the rule that is being put forward to us is that invalid bloods, etc., or invalid tuhars, etc., cannot be used to change a habit. Whatever is valid will remain valid. So this is one of the examples. So the second part, or the second condition, is that the tuhar must appear between two valid bloods. So like we said, you got 10 days haze, you got 15 days tuhar, or even a 20 days tuhar, and then you got 10 days haze and 10 days of blood. So when it occurs between two valid bloods and it's 15 days or more, that can change the tuhar habit. So look at this example where it doesn't occur between two valid bloods. Right? So the example is she's got a 15 days tuhar habit, but now it's a 15 days of tuhar between two istihadahs, and we know istihadha is not valid blood, it's invalid blood. So the example is she spots for 2 days, then she is clean for 20 days, then she spots for 2 days. So day 1, day 2, she spots, right? Remember, it's under 3 days, so this cannot be counted as valid blood. This is invalid blood. And when you got invalid blood, that blood will be istihadha, it cannot be haze, right? Then she is clean for 20 days. So now, and then after she spots for 2 days, day 23 and day 24. So again, istihadha, because it's not 3 days. So at the start, she's got istihadha. At the end, she's got istihadha. In the middle, she's got 20 days. So now, do you say that her tuhar has changed from 15 days to 20 days? The answer is no. Why? Because although it's more than 15 days, it did not appear between two valid bloods. So the result is the tuhar cannot be established as it appeared between two istihadahs, two invalid bloods. Therefore, she reverts to her previous tuhar habit of 15 days. Going forward, we say, listen, even though you're clean for 20 days here, you're still going to follow a 15-day tuhar habit. If the mufti asks you, what's your tuhar habit? You're not going to say 20 days, you're going to say 15 days. So just keep in mind, we looked at 3 conditions so far: 15 days or more. There must be no mixture of blood, and the third, it must occur between two valid bloods. Now we're looking at the first examples where it must occur between two valid bloods. We look at a second example where it still must occur between two valid bloods. In this situation, it occurred between one haze and one istihadha. Again, she has a 15-day tuhar habit. So remember, between two valid bloods. Here, it's between one valid and invalid blood. So let's look at the example. She spots for 5 days. Then she is clean for 20 days. Then she spots for 2 days. Right? So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5 on the chart, she spotted. So here, she spotted 3 days or more. So now we say it's valid blood. No issue there. But then she was clean for full 20 days. She was clean for full 20 days. And then she spotted again on day 26 and day 27. And here it is obviously less than 3 days. It's not a valid blood. So it is counted as Istihaadhah. So at the start, you got a valid blood. At the end, you got invalid blood. And in the middle, you've got 20 days. Her previous tuhar habit is 15 days. Does it change now from 15 to 20? Or does it remain 15? So the answer is it remains 15. Why? Because this tuhar did not appear between two valid bloods. It appeared between one valid blood and one invalid blood. Like the result states, the tuhar cannot be established as it appeared between one haze and an istihadha, invalid blood. Therefore, she reverts to her previous tuhar habit of 15 days. Okay, this is the second example. The third example where it still must appear between two valid bloods, but it hasn't appeared between two valid bloods. It has appeared between a Nifaas and Istihaadhah. Again, the woman's tuhar habit is 15 days. So let's look at the example here. She spots for 40 days. Then she is clean for 20 days. Then she spots for 2 days. Right. So full 40 days from day one of the first month to day 10th of the second month, she spots, right? Then she is clean for 20 days and then she spots for 2 days. Right? Remember, her habit is 15 days. So again, the question is, after the Nifaas, she was clean for 20 days. Does it change from 15 to 20 going forward? The answer is no. Why? Because she has invalid blood thereafter. The tuhar occurred between one valid blood and one invalid blood. It hasn't appeared between two valid bloods, therefore the tuhar habit cannot change. Result, the tuhar habit cannot be established as it appeared between a Nifaas, valid blood, and Istihaadhah, invalid blood. Therefore, she reverts to her previous tuhar habit of 15 days. We look at a fourth example where it still must appear between two valid bloods, but it hasn't. Here it appeared within a 40-day Nifaas period. Again, the woman's tuhar habit is 15 days. The example is she spots for 15 days, then she is clean for 20 days, and then she spots for 5 days. All right. So we look at the calendar from day 1 to day 15, she spotted. Remember, this is Nifaas, right? And then for the next 20 days within the Nifaas period of 40 days, she was clean. And then she spotted from day 6 of the next month to day 10 of the next month. So the last 5 days before 40 days was over and terminated, she spotted, right? So do you say it's changed from 15 to 20? The answer is no. Why? Because it didn't appear between between two valid bloods. It appeared within one valid blood. So the result is the tuhar cannot be established as it appeared within one Nifaas valid blood. Therefore, she reverts to a previous tuhar habit of 15 days. This is the fourth example where it shows us that the blood must occur, the tuhar must occur between two valid bloods. Right? So just to look at what is tuhar fasid and invalid purity. And invalid purity is basically what isn't a tuhar sahih and what isn't a valid purity. It's the opposite of it. So in other words, if it's less than 15 days, it's counted as invalid purity. If it's mixed with blood at the beginning, middle, or end, although it's 15 days, it's still counted as an invalid purity. And lastly, if it did not occur between two valid bloods, but rather it occurred between two invalid bloods, or one valid and another invalid blood, then that tuhar will be counted as tuhar fasid and invalid purity. It cannot be used to establish a habit of tuhar and purity going forward. So these are the two definitions you have to understand: tuhar sahih and tuhar fasid. There's a question here. If a woman, okay, on the questions, let's try and restrict all questions to the slides being presented and to the discussions being presented, not a question that's out of the lessons discussion. So the question is, if a woman sees blood on day 1, then nothing until day 9. She just sees one spot of blood when wiping, not a full flow, then nothing again. Is all the days regarded as haze? This woman doesn't have a habit, as she had 3 pregnancies in 3 years, so the cycle never settled. Also, this woman is on a pill. How does she calculate when to stop reading Salah, etc.? Okay, so in some aspects, this has a question of tuhar in it. A woman spotted on day 1, then she spotted on day 9. Now remember, in the first lesson, in the first part, we discussed and emphasized that there is no difference in regards to the rulings of Haidh, Nifaas, etc. if it is a spot or if it is a flow. There's no difference. It's still counted. So she spotted on day 1, she spotted on day 9, and thereafter nothing. Is it counted as Haidh? Isn't it counted as Haidh? So we discussed and pointed out that valid bloods are used to establish habits. And valid blood is that if it is counted 3 days or more or 10 days or less, even if the blood may be legal blood. In other words, it wasn't a literal spot, but it's counted legal because it appeared between the first and the last spotting. So in this case, you'll count it from day 1 to day 9. Retrospectively, it will be calculated and stated that from day 1 to day 9, she was in the state of haze. Any salahs that she performed during that time not counted. Any fast that she kept between those days not counted. She'll have to repeat the fast. She doesn't have to repeat the salahs, because a woman in the state of haze doesn't make up for any salahs. She makes up for fast, right? So now obviously on day 1, she spotted, she never know right up till day 9 whether this period will be counted as hayd. She'll be excused, but from day 1 onwards she'll continue as normal until day 9 comes. Then she'll identify and recognize that retrospectively she was in the state of hayd. So she wouldn't know that at that point in time. She must continue as normal. Now, if a woman had these pregnancies, even if it's 3 years, that is why it is wajib and compulsory for her to keep a record. So let's say 3 years pass by after the first pregnancy, and she had a haze, a valid haze habit before the first pregnancy. 3 years later, when she starts spotting again, she is going to have to follow that haze habit that she experienced last before the first pregnancy. So, when women say they don't have a habit, it's not that they don't have a habit. They have a habit, but they haven't recorded it. That is why it's wajib and compulsory to record it. Now, in regards to pills of the topic, if a woman takes pills, that is just a medical intervention to control the haze, etc. But it doesn't stop the rules of haze in any way. So if it is her days of haze and she spots, we're going to count it as haze. You cannot say, okay, no, it's the pill, and you know what, this is irregular and this is not counted. There's no such thing. If it falls within the rules of haze, within the days of haze, you'll count it as haze. Another question: a woman bled for 6 days and had ghusl. She was clean for 14 days. Okay, this question here, I think we'll have to look at more slides to actually understand these rulings, because this comes under the discussion of tuhr naqis, deficient purities, and that comes in the slides ahead, and perhaps even in the next lesson. So we'll just put a hold on this question here, right? So now we are going to look at another example, right? And this example is being put forward to you to understand the differences between Imam Abu Hanifa and his 2 students. So just look at this example first, right? So a woman spots for 15 days, then she is clean for 15 days, and then she spots for 5 days. Let's look at the chart. First 15 days she spots, right? And remember, this is an example of Nifaas. And then she is clean for 15 days, and then she spots for 5 days, right? So just looking at it, at the face of it, from what we understood and the rules we understood, what we'll say here, that this tuhar appeared within a Nifaas period. It's not actually counted. You'll count the blood from the start till the end. In this case, we'll say that is actually 35 days. So therefore, when we look at the view of Imam Abu Hanifa, he says that there is no tuhar within a 40-day Nifaas period that can separate the bloods. It is counted as one valid blood. The fatwa is on this view. We understood it from previous examples. It's just being made known to you now to understand the difference that comes in the next slide. So he says, listen, from day 1 to day 35, right? 5 days short of a full Nifaas period, he counts everything as Nifaas, right? So just to touch on 1 or 2 things here, because the ladies asked a similar question in regards to haze, but in regards to Nifaas, so let's say she spotted day 1 to day 15, right? She's clean. What does she do? You see, a woman at that point in time, she needs to act upon what she sees, not what she thinks may occur. When it comes to masail of hayd, it is what you see, not what you feel. So let's say she had a previous birth, etc., and she feels, you know what, the last time I had it at full 40 days, and I think it's going to be a full 40 days this time again. And then what she does on day 15, she says, you know what, even though I'm clean now and I've made the ghusl, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to perform salah, I'm not going to keep fast, etc. That is not permissible for her to do. Why? Because she has to act upon what is applicable to her at that point in time. And at this point in time, she is clean. What's the rule if you clean? You make ghusl and you continue as normal with your salahs and with your fast, etc. Yes. Now, uh, 15 days later, she's going to know that, listen, these 15 days in which I actually performed the salah and kept the fast are actually invalid. But she's not going to know that until she spots on day 1 of the next month. In other words, on day 30. But these 15 days that go by, we can't tell her, listen, you sit back and relax and you know what, wait and see what happens. Doesn't work like that. You have to act upon what is compulsory and what is applicable to you at that point in time. It is possible that she doesn't spot at all right until day 40. So then we'll say that what she did at that point, all valid, all counted. But if she spots like she's spotting here on the chart, then everything becomes invalid and it will be counted as a 35-day Nifaas period. G. Okay. So now let's look at the difference here. Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad, what do they say? They say a tuhar within a 40-day Nifaas period will separate two bloods if there is a tuhar of 15 days between them, and it is possible to count a minimum of 3 days haze thereafter within the 40 days. Remember, when we read the preface of Manhalul Warideen, Shaami, Birgavi and Shaami stated that we will not mention any unnecessary differences or any lengthy differences unless it's absolutely necessary. So they're mentioning some of these differences because it's necessary. So Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad say that a tuhar or a 15-day spotting, rather a 15-day clean period within a nifas period will be counted as a separator, provided that before the 40 days ends, you can at least count 3 days of it as haze, right? So they say, look at the example, 15 days spotting, same like the previous. 15 days tuhar, same like the previous. Here, the 5 days spotting, same like the previous. However, the difference is Imam Abu Hanifa counts from day 1 to day 35, the entire period, as nifas. They say, hold on, we're counting the first 15 days as nifas, and we counting the last 5 days as haze. In other words, they count a tuhar within a nifas as a separator. When? If you can count at least the last 3 days or anywhere towards the end as haze. And here it can be counted as 5 days of haze. So they say first 15 nifas, second 15 is counted as a tuhar, a separator, and the last 5, because you can count 3 days or more as haze, is counted as haze. So they don't say 35-day nifas. They say 15 days nifas and 5 days haze. So this is the difference between Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf. However, again, the fatwa is on whose view? The fatwa is on Imam Abu Hanifa's view, where a tuhar is not counted as a separator, regardless of 3 days of blood that can be counted as haze, etc. He counts everything within that period from day 1 to day 35. That is the fatwa. Okay. Then we said there's 4 types of purities. One is tuhar sahih, valid purity. One is tuhar fasid, invalid purity. And one is tuhar tam, complete purity. This is not so important, but we look at it as part of the type of tuhar and purity. A complete purity is 15 days or more. It's a simple term where it's just 15 days or more. We say it's a tuhar tam, it's a complete purity. However, a tuhar tam, a complete purity, although it's complete, it's full 15 days, it can be counted as valid and it can also be counted as invalid. In other words, You could have a mixture of blood at the beginning, middle, or end, or there could be no blood mixed with it. So, regardless of it being counted as valid and invalid at the end of the day, it still can be defined as a complete purity in terms of its number, of 15 days. So let's look at an example of Tuhar Tam. She is clean for 15 days, right? Then she spots for 1 day, invalid blood. Then she is clean for 15 days, right? So look at the chart here. First 15 days, she's clean, right? Then she spots 1 day. We know if it's just 1 day, it can't be counted as valid blood, it's invalid blood. And then she is clean for 15 days again, right? So technically speaking, this is a tuhre tam. It's a complete purity because you got 15 days before that spotting and 15 days after the spotting. However, it's invalid. Why? Because of the 1 day of spotting that's not a valid blood. It's not 3 days. It's less than 3 days. So it makes the tuhar invalid. The result, the tuhar is complete 15 days, but invalid due to 1 day spotting of blood. So in other words, this cannot be counted as a valid tuhar to change the tuhar habit. So let's say if a habit was 20 days, it's not going to change to 15 days because this is invalid tuhar, although it is tam and it is complete. Second example, she is clean for 15 days tuhar. Then she spots for 3 days valid blood. Then she is clean for 15 days tuhar, right? Look at the chart again, same situation or same or similar example as the last slide. Clean for 15 days. She spots on day 16, day 17, and day 18. In other words, 3 days spotting. Now we know it's 3 days, so it's counted as valid blood. And then she is clean for another 15 days. So if a tuhar was 20 days, it will now change to 15 days. Why? Because the tuhar is, number one, 15 days or more, it's tuhar tam, it's complete. Number two, it's not mixed with any blood in at the beginning, middle, or end. And number three, we don't have a situation where it's appeared between invalid bloods, right? In this example, it has to be assumed that the blood before this was valid, right? If the blood before this was invalid, then we know, okay, the third condition hasn't been fulfilled because it hasn't appeared between two valid bloods. So yeah, it's assumed that it has appeared between two valid bloods as well. So the point being made is tuhre tam, like in the previous example, is 15 days, but it's invalid. Here, it is 15 days and it's valid. So a tuhre tam could be used interchangeably for invalid and valid tuhars. Then we come to tuhre naqis. What is tuhre naqis? Tuhre naqis, incomplete purity, and incomplete purity is less than 15 days. So let's look at an example. She is clean for 14 days. Then she spots for 1 day invalid blood. So 14 days clean, and then on day 15 she spots. Now we know in order to count a purity as valid, or rather in order to count a separator, it has to be 15 days. And when it's less than 15 days, it's counted as invalid blood. So result, the 14 days is incomplete purity as it is less than 15 days. So the question is, can a tuhre naqis be counted as valid just like you had tuhre tam counted as valid as well? So the answer is no. You can never count a tuhre naqis as valid. Why? Because it's less than 15 days, it's 14 days. So if you look at the last slide here, it says that a complete purity can be valid and invalid, whereas an incomplete purity can only be valid. So a tuhar tam can be used interchangeably with a valid and invalid tuhar, but when it comes to a tuhar naqis, an invalid purity, it can only be invalid. Why? Because it can never be 15 days. It will always be less than 15 days. Okay. So this is the discussion on the different types of purities. Uh, so you've got tuhre sahih, tuhre fasid, tuhre tam, and tuhre naqis. Like I said in the beginning, these are used as guidelines, especially or more particularly in the case of early bloods. It's not used as fixed and as rigid as the rules of Haidh and Nifaas apply. So, if you looked at the previous examples that came, 10 days Hayes, 15 days Tohar, and then 10 days Hayes. Okay, fine. If it was her habit, Tohar habit was 20, it now changes to 15. It is very flexible in the sense that you can still count. You can still count a valid Hayes even though it is not after an action a valid purity. Why? Because the purities are used simply as a guideline to count early bloods. Okay, so this brings us to the end of today's lesson. The reason why we've ending it a little bit earlier than the last lesson is that if we go into the next slide, we will not finish that discussion. And the next slide and discussion is in regards to the Tuhre Naqis, which one of the ladies has just asked about that. So it just to maintain, a full discussion on that, we'll leave that to the next lesson. If there's any questions now on the slides that were presented to you, we can take them now. So the other thing I'd like to bring to your attention is that, see, we are showing you slide with calendars, just to make you understand or see, the spotting on this day and that day, etc. Ideally, you would want to calculate with numbers. You would want to calculate with numbers. So one of the easy methods to use is you work with when you say bloods, you use the letter B, and when you say tohar, you use the letter T. So if a woman has a habit of, let's say, 6 days, so we'll say take a piece of paper and write down 6B, for example. And then she has a tohar habit of, let's say, 15 days. So then we'll say 15T. So you've got, it's easier to work it out that way when you need to calculate a habit. Otherwise, you're not going to come to a calendar and work it out like that. It will be more difficult to do it that way. The calendars are just there to show you, to understand the example in an easy format without now pinning it down on paper. But the better way to do it, once you understand and start picking up these rules, is to write down in terms of numbers: 3B, 6B, 15T, 30T, etc. Because you can see all of it at once rather than looking at six calendars to understand what is happening. It's more easier and less confusing. So look, the calendar that we're using is obviously we were just working with the normal 30-day calendar, because 30 days is our Islamic month, doesn't go ahead of that. So we're just sticking with 30 days to show you these examples. Yes, the one correction was for day 1 to day 40. That actually, if you work with timings from 8 o'clock, then that will end on day 41 at 8 o'clock. But here it's assuming that it's from the start of the day. So when we spoke of that example, that because we mentioned a specific hour, then obviously it will end on day 41 at that specific hour. But when it's assumed that, let's say, it's from that exact start of that day, then it will end at day 40 at that time. But when you specifying time like 8 o'clock, etc., then we'll have to go on to the next day. Okay, so look, Tohar habits are used as a guideline. So let's say, like I mentioned the example, a woman spotted for, uh, let's say, 10 days, and then she was clean for 60 days, and then she spotted for 10 days. So this now establishes her habit of 60 days, right? So now in the next month, instead of now spotting after day 60, she now spots after day 30. Right? We'll get into all the details as to early bloods, etc. But just understand this one example. She starts spotting after day 30. Do you count it? Don't you count it? You will still count it as haze if it fulfills the minimum criteria of 3 days, etc. after day 30. You won't wait now and say, hold on, I need to wait 60 days. In other words, 2 full months to actually count a haze. Doesn't work like that. Yes, she will count it now. And she will also state that, listen, it is number one, the Tuhar is, now we need to see now, will it change from 60 to 30? So we say, yes, it will change. Obviously, why? Because it's 15 days and more. It there's no mixture of blood, and number three, it now is appearing between valid bloods. This will now, let's say, end up as 10 days. So it will change from 60 to 30. That is what is meant by it being flexible. It changes very quickly, and the habit can change from a 60 valid to a 30 valid to her habit. You see, there's this format of Birgavi's format and Shami's format. Remember, they came 300 years ago. So this existed there. It's just that people were not aware of this methodology. They were following other views and opinions. Remember, uh, again, why we read the preface is to point to you that Birgavi and Shami are going to be discussing Aqwa, the most strongest of views, Asah, the most authentic of views, Al-Mukhtar lil-Fatwa, the most preferred views for fatwa. He didn't say that every view that's mentioned in other books are totally incorrect. He did mention in passing that some of them are incorrect, and some of them don't have a basis at all in his preface and discussion. But look, when it comes to these type of things, at times it may be mentioned in the book but not the strongest of views, and at times it may be mentioned there but totally has no basis. So we are going to assume that what they followed uh, from those ulama, etc., is that they took it from books that may have not been the most authentic. But what Birgavi and Shami are mentioning, those are the most authentic views to follow. And look, when it comes to your ibadat, yeah, you got salah, you got fast, etc. Why would you follow a view that is lesser than the best? Because your ibadat are going to be presented in the court of Allah. You want to present the best. So that is why you follow the best and the best rulings. And this is the reason why this program or class or this methodology is being presented to you. Okay. How is salah affected when tuhar seems like it changed? So, some of the questions cannot be answered now. I can answer it, but you are not going to understand the answer without, understanding the rulings. Remember, when it comes to Hayz, Nifas, and Tuhar, uh, a lot of the rules are determined retrospectively. In other words, it's not determined immediately. A time will have to come pass, or you'll have to pass a time where you can fully understand. Like for instance, the lady gave the example of day 1 and day 9. Day 1, hey, this is not haze, but then day 9 comes, you spot retrospectively the whole period is counted as haze. So you are not take into account for that. You are excused because at that point in time you don't know exactly for sure immediately that these are days of haze. You're only going to know that afterwards. Okay, so if a woman spots on day 1 and day 2 and then she stops spotting, when does she need to make ghusl and perform salah? So here we know it has to be 3 days, right? So day 1, day 2, she spotted. We're not going to count it as haze, it's counted as istihaadhah. What does she do? Now, because there is, again, these rules will come later, but I'll tell you now, she'll make wudu and she'll continue with salah because it's before 3 days. If she spots 3 days or just after 3 days, then she'll make ghusl and then continue as normal when it stops. Gee, so the one call from the woman in the UK, yes, what she was doing was totally incorrect, and she was in a state of frustration. And this was in Ramadan. She didn't know what to do whatsoever in Ramadan because she was religiously and strictly following that 60 days or those number of days. She said, "No, I can't count it at all." So, in other words, she is letting, she is affecting her fast whilst not knowing it, and she is, making a lot of the fast invalid. If your Hayz and Tuhar is different every month, but it remains within the 3 10 days Hayz and more than 15 days Tuhar, then will we say that every month my habit is changed? So there's a whole discussion on, change of habit, etc. There's a lengthy discussion on that in the slides. But just to answer this, right? So last month she spotted 6 days. This month she spotted 8 days. So yes, we're going to say from last month to this month it has changed from 6 to 8. And similarly, going forward, every month this can happen. And we look at what actually changes a habit every month. Similarly, in regards to Tuhar, the last month it was a valid 20 days. This month it's a valid 18 days. We'll say, listen, it's changed. And we look at the details as to how many times you have to experience it for it to actually be counted as changed. If a woman goes to the bathroom after a few hours and sees blood, but does not know exactly when it was passed, what time does she note as the start end of the haze? Okay, so this again is another discussion that's coming forward. That the time that she's put the pad on, she was clean, but then when she took it out, let's say 8 hours later, she saw spotting. When do you actually count it? Just to give you the answer, you will count it from the time it was placed ihtiyatan. But again, this discussion comes later. My habit of haze is 10 days, but after the 7th day, sometimes it's completely clean. Then the next day is yellow. Should a woman wait until the 10th as a habit or make ghusl? What is the time frame to work on to see when to make ghusl? A full day clean or from one salah to the next salah, right? So a woman's last valid habit was 10 days. This month she is spotted on day 7 and then she was clean. So now what does she do? She will have to make a ghusl and continue. So what will this again will is another discussion. She'll wait closer to the salah time, to the end of the salah time, and see if there's any spotting, and then she'll make ghusl and continue as normal. She's not, her gut feeling, again, her gut feeling is telling her that, listen, tomorrow, day 8, although on day 7 at, let's say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my there was no spotting, but she knows tomorrow, day 8 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, she's going to spot again. That's a gut feeling. But here you don't follow your gut feeling. You will follow what is applicable to you at that point in time and what you see. What you see. It's all about what you see and not what you feel. So she'll make ghusl on that day 7, and then she will continue as normal. If every month at the end of Haidh, a woman's if every month at the end of Haidh, a woman's spotting is very spaced out, i.e. on her second last day, she spots at Zohar, then she spots at Isha, then at Asr the next day, what does she do regarding ghusl and salah? See, it's not about what happened last month. What happened last month, you're only going to use the habit as a guide. But this current month, if let's say last month was continuous and this month it's spaced out, you're still going to keep the rules in mind. That is why I'm repeating this over and over again. It's not about what you feel. It's about what you see at that point in time and apply the rules accordingly. So if at a salah time, let's say it's the end of Zohar time and there's no spotting, what must she do? She must make ghusl and perform a Zohar salah. So, and then let's say Isha has come and then she spotted, or let's say towards the end of Maghrib, she spotted, and there's no time to actually make ghusl. We'll discuss that later. But that entire period prior to that, that Asr, etc., that was performed will not be counted, because legally we're going to count that intervening period as legal blood and a period of Haidh. If Haidh goes over 10 days, but Haidh habit comes out only 4 to 5 days, and she gets clean on, let's say, 7th day, then starts spotting later on the 8th or 9th day, becomes clean, then spots, how can she save her salah? See, it's not about saving your salah. It's about what is compulsory upon you at that point in time. So day 3, day 4 is your habit. You will follow that, make ghusl and continue. Then day 7, you spot it again. You can't do anything about it because that's the spotting. So it invalidates those salahs. Same with day 8, same with day 9. So when you're talking about saving your salah, the only way this can happen is, let's say a woman, for some reason, she's on some menstrual tablet with the advice of a doctor, and then everything stops and there's no spotting whatsoever. That may be the only way to do it. What will you do if your tuhar is different every month, but more than 15 days does it change? So your haze and tuhar can be different every month. You have to keep a record. Now, whether it is the tuhar is valid or invalid, you'll only know if you got a record for it. And we know it has to be valid for it to change. If it's not valid, like we discussed in this lesson, it won't change. So look, if a woman has got continuous flow of blood, then we've got no issue. She knows, okay, there's nothing to do here. But if she spots in the morning, on day 7, she'll make ghusl and continue as normal. In the night that comes, she spots again. She will say, listen, that entire period is legal blood. She must make a ghusl and then continue as normal. The problem will come about when it is intermittent. If it is continuous, you got no issue because it's easy to identify. So in simple terms, when does she make ghusl? This slide comes again later. So that she will make ghusl towards or closer to the end time of salah, when she knows, okay, now it's stopped, and you know what, she's clean. She'll make the ghusl and she'll continue. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of today's lesson. We will delve into Tuhr Naqis and the details in the next lesson. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحان الله وبحمده. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.